if the story is good, the middle movies are going to be less memorable than the beginning and end.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of A Lost Plot, the podcast by storytellers for storytellers so that we can tell better stories ourselves. As always, I'm your host, Maverick, and today we have back with us our co-host, Avalon, to review the 2013 American dystopian action film. That's right, that's number 2 in the Hunger Games, book trilogy, but it'd be a quad series for films. We're talking about Hunger Games Catching Fire. The screenplay was by Simon Beaufoy and Michael DeBruyne and directed by Francis Lawrence. And it is based off Catching Fire by Suzanne Collins, which is, like I just said, the second installment in the Hunger Games series. So, Avalon, what is your initial impressions and rating for the Hunger Games Catching Fire?
We have this conversation on this podcast frequently where we will argue about whether you should rate a movie in regards to the series it's a part of or standalone. I think this is the case of the former, where it's this is clearly part of a, maybe the first movie stands alone on its own, but the second was clearly part of a larger story, where it's it's harder to rate this movie on its own without acknowledging the first movie and the third movie. And the third movie does come immediately after this one. So it's okay. In the other, I guess the fourth one too. But but as terms of even though it is a middle entry, it does have ongoing themes and ideas that are almost continuations of the first movie, but also leading up to the third and final movie as well. So it's got elements to it that are worth noting. So it doesn't just feel like filler. It does continue to explore certain ideas in the course of its runtime. So I really like it. I gave it a 7.25. So
Okay. Yeah, I think I already know. So let's see how this one goes. I am curious. I will say I enjoyed watching this again. There was certain aspects of this film that I had not remembered when I had seen it years and years ago, right? And so rewatching it, there was a lot of enjoyment there. But there was a couple things there that it's just in this genre of making a movie that is a continuation, and there's no necessarily finished arc in this one, if you will, right? There's definitely a sense in which this is not a self-contained story that leads into the next one, insofar as it's the start of something that's going to happen, and it doesn't end there, even though the movie ends. And so the idea of that, I think, is it's always a struggle of a multi-part movie series. Is how do you do that well? I think that there is some fall off from that in this one, and we'll get into why I think that's the case. But and I think that it'll be a really interesting discussion, because this will be a case study on how do you make these middle films still compelling in a way that you can still grip the audiences. And with all that being said, there's still a lot of things about this film that make it really good, which is surprising to me, once again, going back to that idea, because I don't recall this film very distinctly, right? There was not a lot that stuck in my mind, but then when I was watching it, I went, oh, that's really good. Oh, that's really interesting. And so taking those pieces and realizing these are good, so why is this not sticking in my head, was a big thought process of me leading up to this recording. So with all that being said, I gave it a 5.65. So a little above middle of the road. I still thought it was very enjoyable. I think there's some really great elements to it. And then there's other areas where it fell short, especially in regards to how it concludes aspects of the film. Without getting too deep into it, we'll get into that for sure. If you're curious, keep listening. But before we do, Avalon, you want to give them a summary of what Hunger Games Catching Fire is all about?
So Catching Fire picks up a few months after the end of the first movie, the first story, part of the first Hunger Games. Katniss and Peeta now live in the Victor's Village in the 12th District, which is a nicer area compared to the rest of the district. It's sort of to commemorate their victory, to show that they've won the Hunger Games, that they survived, they're victors. So now they're neighbors to Haymitch. But even though they live in this area, Katniss is still hunting. She's still doing the things we saw in the first movie. She's going out and she's with Gabe, but now there's like tension between them because of what she had to do during the first Hunger Games. Like, he clearly isn't happy that she encouraged that she, even though it was an act, that she is in front of everyone pretending to love Peeta, and he's, she claims to love him. He questions whether she actually does or not. And Peeta, even though Peeta cares for her still too, but he's accepted in a way that she's going to love someone else, that she doesn't actually like him. And then we get President Snow. President Snow shows up, more or less revealing he doesn't believe her act, and she has to convince him that their love affair, that Peeta and her love is a genuine. They try, they fail. And then,
yeah, I mean, I think it's less so that it's more so that he needs to make sure that she's not foaming distrust.
Well, yes,
and that's the act is part of that, but it's not like what he demands of her per se.
Well, yes, because she's
so,
a symbol.
Like, don't continue to foment unrest through the actions that you took in the first film.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's the funny thing. Like, she doesn't even know that she is causing unrest in the other districts, but he more or less reveals to her that her actions are causing unrest and fomenting a rebellion of sorts, and so she needs to play the part that she's given herself of two lovebirds, people in love, while also like continuing to support Panem. And so she has to do that convincingly over the course of this tour of all the districts, which is like celebrating their victory in the Hunger Games, the 74th Hunger Games. But they try, and the movie spent some time in that, but then they fail. And then the 75th Hunger Games is announced, the third quarter quell, and to switch things up, the only participants are former victors, like former participants. So Katniss is, because she's the only female victor from 12, she is more or less forced into the Hunger Games again. So, and from there, it becomes a fight for survival, like planning and trying to see if there's a way to stop the Hunger Games, and when they're actually in the games, to survive to the end. And that's more or less the story of catching fire. And the whole time in the background, there is this, there's ferment, there's rebellion, there's conflict that Katniss and Peeta both witness, and they start to see the rise of something that they didn't see before. So,
right. Yes, that's more or less what goes on, and we'll get into that more as we progress in this analysis. But for now, stay tuned. We're going to start off, as we always do, trying to get those ideas about the main characters as they're reintroduced. What are your thoughts on Katniss as she's reintroduced as the protagonist to this film, as she sees that she has this conflict with her love interest Gale, and then Peeta, and then Haymitch, all getting reintroduced to the scenes, and then of course Coriolanus Snow shows up and threatens her. What are your thoughts on all of that?
I have to say, one thing I really like about this particular series is consequences, because even though we're shown Katniss's actions at the very end of the Hunger Games clearly still have repercussions, and we're shown that, where it's like Gale, who she loved a little bit in the first movie, the first part of the story, now doesn't trust her as much as she used to. Now there is an expectation from everyone that she realizes she and Peeta are being watched. They have to put up this act. They have to pretend to be in love still, even though she doesn't feel like she loves him. And even though Peeta likes her, he knows the love isn't fully reciprocated. And at the same time, she and because of her actions, there's now unrest. People are like seeing her as a symbol of rebellion, and they want her to suddenly rise up against Panem because they see her act in their arena as an act of defiance. She doesn't know that completely at the beginning of this story, but she starts to see that because of Snow. Snow shows up and threatens her, revealing that she should have died in the arena, that if Seneca Crane had done what he should have done, then one of them would have been dead, and they would have been a victor, but because he panicked, now they have two victors in the situation on their hand. So, because of that, it's like, we're now in this beginning situation. It's believable because of the situation at the end of the last movie, and now it's like, it immediately puts the everyone on edge and puts raises the stakes. And so now we see like why Katniss and Peeta have to like actually act. They have to really sell this without destroying the peace in Panem, but they don't do a very good job of that. Because you several mistakes.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting just because the issue with Seneca Crane specifically is this idea that he's it's not that Snow is necessarily saying that she did a bad thing. He's more or less applauding her in some ways by saying, like, you did the smart thing, and Seneca Crane was an idiot. Someone had to die, and guess what? He made himself pull the short end of that straw. And it's not like she necessarily cares about that, but then he says that doesn't mean that the job is done, right? It doesn't mean that where you're at right now is okay. And that's where he gets into the threats regarding her family and all of these other people. So yeah, no, 100%. And like, that's really what I guess I wanted to double click into, this idea of Katniss as she's developing into this, because she doesn't know initially that this is all going on. She doesn't know that she fomented unrest. And then she goes on this tour and starts to see each of the different districts and how they are ready to foment and rage at the capital. What are your thoughts on her as she's reintroduced and develops throughout this little escapade across the different districts?
I would say that she is a character under duress, because you see the pressure where people clearly want her to be the symbol of rebellion. Panem wants her to comply with the rules and to stop the rebellion and to fight against this, while she is just trying to survive. Right. And she just wants her life back in a way that she had at the very beginning of the first movie, and she doesn't have that, and she's in the situation where she has to like act up for the cameras and try to convince her friends that she actually still is on their side. And so it's like she is caught in the middle of a crossfire, literally, and that's just like she has to make some tough choices. She has to figure out what to say, and the reality is she is a human being. She's emotional, and there are moments where in the movie where like she fails because she is like, I think of the, like in the District 11 where she sees the picture of Rue and Rue's family, like she isn't supposed to say anything, but because of what happened in the first Hunger Games and what we've witnessed, she can't help but stand up and say like a few words like honoring Rue, because Rue was her friend in the arena, and she can't ignore that. And so like, and that's a human response, and then we understand that it's an understandable moment, but it doesn't help her or Peeta when it happens, and it like adds to the problems. So
yeah, exactly. And that's part of the thing is you see the wave of emotion more or less push her toward this moment. And that's really where you see maybe some of her humanity, where she knows she's supposed to cater to the demands of Snow and to placate the people and make it all look hunky-dory, right? And then she can't help herself because she realizes that how much loss happened in that arena and how much she should be dead because of the things that happened there, but she's not, because of the kindness of these other people that are now dead. And so that really provides the contrast there, where she feels this guilt and it causes her to react, in, I mean, in an appropriate way, but in some ways also there's that consequence you were talking about earlier, right? Where she now is doing something that Snow is like, that's not okay. You're basically signing your own death warrant at that point. And he's, I mean, on the back end, you're seeing that Snow's ready to just take her out. Like she's done, she's dead. And you have Plutarch who's advocating for her and more or less saying not that she shouldn't die, but that she shouldn't die yet, and she needs to die from a symbolic perspective first before she dies physically. And that's more or less the game that you see played on the back end as well, which we'll get to that in a minute. But yeah, I mean, I think that in regards to what was interesting about this, and I want to get your thoughts on it specifically, is this idea that the lead up to the games in this one felt way longer than in the first one. Is that a fair assessment on your part?
Oh, absolutely. And I would actually say that it's actually necessary this time around, because, I mean, because this time we're given, because even in the book and in the movie, we're shown that she and Peter are given a chance to prove themselves, to try to stop the unrest, clearly all this conflict that's rising up in the districts. They're given a chance to try to placate that, to try to make it, try to not silence the people, but make them happy and to get them to stop rebelling. So they're given a chance, and so in a way, so when they go on this tour, and it's also a way to introduce the districts, to show us as the audience, okay, there is problems, there is unrest, people are wanting to rise up against Panem, especially after what happened. And it also just further highlights in the setup of the story, the conflict Katniss is going through, where it's she is generally a good person. She doesn't want to kill people. She doesn't want to be in this position. She didn't want to be in the games. She only chose to be in the games because she wanted to protect her sister, Prim. And now she's in this position where it's everyone's expecting her to rise up, and she doesn't want to. She just wants to survive. But she also she also doesn't want to hurt anyone either. So it's she's being forced to play a hand that she didn't want to be dealt to begin with. The whole lead up to the games, it is longer, sure, but also we're shown the intricacies and the politics of Panem and the districts as she goes through them. We're shown the absolute the hedonism of the capital, Panem. We're shown all these contrasting elements of the story of the world that she lives in, so we get an idea of where she comes from, who she's fighting against, and why the people are rising up in a way. So the whole lead up, and even after the tour, when she goes back to the district and she's failed more or less, then they send peacekeepers to her district, and now everything is under martial law or whatever. They are now under a curfew. The black market's shut down, and everyone is now living in a worse situation in her district under the oppressive rule of Panem. And and it just I'm now losing where I was going with this.
Yeah, no.
But yeah, it all leads up to the games. It was it's all leads to the moment when they announced the 75th Hunger Games, the third quarter quell, and we're revealed she has to go back to the games now, and it's clearly an attempt by Panem to kill Katniss. We all know that. Because of what happened already, and it makes sense why this has happened.
Sure, so, and I'm sorry,
that was a little longer than I meant it to be, but
that's fine. I want to double click a little bit into this idea that you were just mentioned briefly. This idea that she more or less was in two things, right? First off, she was. They take this time, right, to elongate the issues that you had seen hinted at in the first film, and then expound on those, right? And so you see that, for example, when they have the announcement, or not the announcement, the party at Snow's place, right? And everyone's very hedonistic. They're eating all that they can only to throw it back up so that they can eat more and try everything, right? And you see these other aspects of hedonism compared to the absolute depths of despair that people are in who are in the poor districts, and how you see that contrasted even more in this film compared to the previous one, just because you see you need to get the impact, I guess, in this film. And that's what they're really trying to do, is build up the impact of why there is such unrest amongst the different districts. And that's very key. And looking forward a little bit, that's important, because we need to know why everyone's at the place where they're about to riot and revolt against the government, by seeing where they're at currently, right? And so if you see where they're at currently in this moment of despair, it makes sense where we go in the next film, right? That's a little bit of a sneak peek, and it's kind of obvious it's going that direction, I would say, especially early on in this film. So not much of a spoiler there, but that's you want to build that up well. And so that's one of the things they do very well in this film. The other thing I wanted to hit on, which I'm curious to get a little more thought from you on this, is you noted that Katniss, is this character who was part of the Hunger Games more or less just for survival. But then you see that she has symbolically developed in the eyes of the people in a way that she can't even escape it, right? She doesn't even want to be a symbol. She just was trying to live. And everyone else now sees her as this member of the elites, I guess, at this point, who rejects the benefits of that, or more or less. She's the one who is revolting against that and saying that this is not okay, and becomes a symbol of anarchy by the people. What are your thoughts on those themes specifically that are developed here?
Well, I mean, this all kind of ties back to the very end of the very first Hunger Games, because when we reviewed it, we discussed how she is trying to survive for the whole like first Hunger Games, but the end, when she is forced to like it's just her and Peeta, she takes a stand in a way where she's like, I'm done. Like, I'm not going to kill Peeta. Like, he's willing to let her kill him, but she's like, no, I'm not playing this game. Like, in her head, she's like, I'm done. And so she, like, they take the berries, and she's like, they're going to more or less kill themselves with the berries. And so, in a way, that was why, symbolically and visually, to everyone in Panem, it looked like she was rebelling against the games, though it also could have been seen as an act of like love, like for Peeta, like she wouldn't kill him. So it's like, it's one of those like excellent, like, like unintentionally excellent symbols and moments where it's like, you can't really say that she was outright rebelling, because technically it could have been seen as an act of love, but also it is. So it's like, it depends on who you ask, really, because it's like, it's double-sided. So it's like, that's why I think Snow's willing to give her a chance to quell the unrest, because the symbol is so like open-ended in a way. And so she's like, but like those themes are like, she is done with the games. She doesn't want to keep fighting, and she is still trying to survive. But because she took a stand in a way at the end of the Hunger Games, like she's now symbolically this leader of rebellion to some, and a love symbol to others. And so she's playing this part. She's like been thrust into, she is like the most reluctant hero out there, where it's like she clearly doesn't agree with Panem, but she also doesn't want her family or her friends to die. She just wants to live.
Right. Yeah, that's where she's coming from, 100%. And it's interesting to see almost this element of she is this unwilling symbol. I think that's where it's really unique compared to other aspects, especially because the reluctant hero is one that you do see very often in storytelling genres, right? It's not like it isn't there, but the impetus, I think, has been off of that recently in the film universe, I guess, in all of cinema, right? There's a lot of, especially these Marvel movies, where the hero maybe at first is kind of opposed to it, but then you have the Captain Americas, and you have the other characters as well, who are more or less just wanting to be involved in the situation, and so they're ready to go to war, right? Versus someone like this, who is very much trying to fight it, not even just in the first film, but throughout the films, where they understand that war is a bad thing, which I think is what makes this film, it helps to temper this film, because if you look at the very idea of the Hunger Games, it's the idea that kids are being thrown into an arena to kill each other, right? And that idea is one that is inherently unpalatable, right? You can look at that and go, this is not a good thing to be watching or to be even considering. But the way that it helps ground that is by showing how much she is not in favor of this and doesn't want this. And what's unique about this one compared to the previous one is that is the way everyone feels very strongly, versus in the first one, right, you had the idea that some of the members of the Hunger Games were training all their lives for this, and so this was their moment, versus in this one, you get the idea that that's not the case. Everyone has already won the games. They've gotten the accolades. They've done their time, more or less. And so the idea that they have to now get sacrificed again is an outrage to them, and they don't want anything to do with it. And that's what makes everyone in the Hunger Games, holding hands, revolting against the system that is now trying to continue this oppression in their eyes. So yeah, 100%. I think it's really interesting. It's really unique. And so then developing that so much early on is to help you understand how much the entirety of the districts is being drawn together against this cause, right? That they are not in favor of this. So that's what you get. What are your thoughts on Snow in this film? He is much more so the primary villain compared to the previous one, where I think you could make the case that Seneca Crane was very much the leader against Katniss and everyone else who was in the fights. Mm-hmm. In this case, Snow is much more front and center. So what are your thoughts on him as a villain in this film?
He is very much like the mastermind villain, where it's like he's the leader of Panem. He is clearly orchestrating things from the background, thinking through his options. He doesn't know everything, obviously, but like you see him in his conversations with Plutarch, where like they're just having these conversations on how to destroy Katniss, where it's like the whole politics of the situation. It's like it isn't enough just to kill her. It's like because she is now a symbol, and so Plutarch makes the statement, or like, how do you destroy the symbol? Like you turn her into one of them. And you associate her with one of them, and then you furthermore intercut that with the oppression that the districts are going through, just further to associate that imagery with her in a negative way. And it's like you see these interesting conversations that are happening where it's like, okay, they're like, so like you see Snow like making efforts to destroy her, not just physically, but like completely, like just to. Because she has crossed a line, she failed to quell the unrest, and now he's out to make sure she's made an example of. Mm-hmm. And to do that, he first has to turn the public against her. And so it's a really interesting, like, from a villain perspective, it's interesting to see how he works, how he has these conversations happen, what he orders to happen, how he gets the peacekeepers to do. And, like, because the reality is, even though he's not front and center, like, causing directly, he's not fighting anyone ever in this movie. He's not like pushing any buttons or anything. He's not operating any technology. He is just talking every scene he's in. Mm-hmm. But because he's the president of Panem, that means all the peacekeepers are an extension of him. All like these policies, mm-hmm. everything you see happening, it's like he is in a way Panem. And so it's like even though he is like the face of the villain, Panem is like he is Panem in a way. So Katniss, even though she's fighting Coriolanus Snow, she's actually really fighting Panem. So it's, well, I mean, I guess it's the other way around, but I mean, either way, how you see it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say
she's fighting Panem, but it is Coriolanus Snow, because he is the head and leader of the whole country. So I think he's an excellent villain in that regard, because like it's very hard to show a good villain who doesn't take like direct action in a plot. But because he's older and because of how he has these conversations and who's ordering around, it's believable, and he becomes the front and center villain. He is the face, and we come to associate him exclusively as the villain because of how the story develops. So,
yeah. Well, and you see that with, for example, the Peacekeepers, I think is a great example where Gale, her love interest, ends up getting whipped and beaten brutally for supposedly being an insurgent. Although you don't actually, I don't think you actually see, oh, no, you do. You see the guy was about to kill someone, and then Gale tackles him, so then he gets whipped. Yeah. Yeah, I would say that Snow is fairly decent, I guess. I don't know. I go back and forth. I think that there's this is maybe one of the aspects. There's like two aspects of this film, and we'll get to one later, that I think are a little bit weaker in this one. And I think that, in my opinion, Snow is the weaker aspect of this film. Not necessarily because he's a bad character. I think it's more so because of how he... Well, two things. So, with two things within one of those two things, right? So, the aspect of Coriolanus Snow is that, yeah, you don't see him active as much, but he's playing the strings on the back end. For one, I don't get the impression that he's super nuanced in this one, which I think you get more of in the next film, if I recall correctly. But there's a certain sense in which he's more or less has a hammer, and he wants to beat the nail into the system, right? or put the square peg through a round hole by using a hammer kind of idea is what you get with him, where he goes, you need to do this, otherwise you die. And whenever you see him talking to Plutarch later, after he threatens Katniss, he uses the same type of reasoning. He goes, all right, you need to force this, otherwise they die. And that's where Plutarch becomes a tempering force to him, where he becomes the leader of propaganda, if you will, where he says there is a nuanced way to do this that ends up taking down your enemies in an effective way that also dissolves the symbolism that they have come to hold. And that is important for the idea of keeping leadership in the capital. So Plutarch helps with that. Plutarch gets a little convoluted by the end in regards to his role. So I would say that's why I'm not including him in the antagonist analysis. It's pretty clear why, right? I mean, if you're listening to this, come on, like you watched the film, Plutarch's actually a good guy, right?
Yeah, so we should discuss Plutarch, but yes, I would not label him as the villain.
Yeah, we'll get to him immediately after this. But in regards to Snow, right? I think him himself is not that nuance. The other thing too in this film, to be clear, we'll talk about him later in the other films, but yeah, in this film, in regards to the other aspect of him is that he is, and this is one thing I really struggled with in regards to feeling how would this be better, because I believe this film is done in first person, or the book is done in first person, correct? It's been a minute since I've read the books. I know the first book was for sure done in first person.
I think all three books follow, I don't know if it's written first person or third person, but I do know it follows Katniss's viewpoint almost exclusively through all three books. And it's like, so anything she doesn't know, we don't know. It's only when she gets information that we get information. So it's like, that's why in the first book, you don't know about the unrest in the other districts, because she didn't know. She doesn't know until the beginning of the second book and the beginning of the second movie. So it's like we're getting information as she does in real time. So,
and we actually discussed that in the last new review, where we talked about how that was actually one of the good things that they did in the film, was help to use that extra perspective to add some conflict in the film. I wonder if that wasn't the right move in this film. And the reason is because you get this idea that Snow and Plutarch are having these conversations, and Snow's like, we need to kill Katniss. We need to kill Katniss. We need to kill Katniss. And Plutarch is going, oh, well, we need to kill the symbol first. We need to more or less massage this to make it nuanced. And while it's effective at developing Plutarch, which is important, and showing a little bit more of the villainy of Snow, I get the impression that it's very clear plot armor, if you will, where you get the impression as the audience that she's not in as imminent danger as you would think otherwise if you didn't hear these conversations. Does that make sense? And what are your thoughts on that?
I actually disagree with that, only because the way I see it, these extra scenes, because, I mean, sure, she's not in direct danger per se from Snow, but she is the target, and the intention is to eventually destroy her. And I would argue that the added scenes do a few things where they, one, even though she's not, you do know she is the target, and that they are going to dismantle who she is, and like in front of, and like try to destroy her in every possible way. That is the intention. So these conversations, like, we would not, if we just followed Katniss exclusively in the second movie, we would not be privy to these conversations. But because we get a better idea of like how far they're willing to go to destroy Katniss. And it's like, okay, this isn't just a little bit. They want to like make her a symbol, like make an example of her. And that may mean, and that also implies that not only are they going to go after her, they're going to go after her family, they're going to go after Gale, they're going to go after Pete and his family. It just like, it further just emphasizes those points that we probably would not be getting as much. It also further, I mean, while I would also disagree, I mean, while sure, Snow is saying we need to kill her, that she needs to die, the way you phrase it almost makes it sound like he is like gung-ho, like, oh, we need to do this now kind of thing. I get the impression he's got a more laid-back attitude about it. Like, this needs to happen some point soon, but we don't have to do it immediately. Like, it almost gives, in my mind, like when I saw those scenes, it gave this idea of control, where it's like, we are still in control of the situation. We have time to do this. And that's why we need to destroy her symbolically and not just physically, because it's almost like this system is rigged against her, more or less. It just implies that no matter what she does, Panem is working in concert against her. The odds are not in her favor in this particular conflict. So so that in my head, it's like these extra scenes just emphasize those points. So like maybe there isn't as much nuance in the ways you describe. I would say, going back to the fact that this is a second movie, we did get some of that nuance in the first movie with some of the conversations. So like, it's not like the audience doesn't know is nuanced and like he has some of these other factors to him. So while we don't get that as much this time around, sure. But it's not like the audience doesn't know. Now, there's another thing I'd say these extra scenes do, but we'll discuss that in a moment when we discuss Plutarch.
Well, and that's exactly actually where I was going to with it. I think that some of this does get put in a different light when you look at Plutarch. And Plutarch is this character who is more or less the propaganda machine. He is the leader of the games and also is helping to try to dismantle Katniss's persona in these films. And that's where you get this pushback in these conversations. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on him, because he is definitely a front and center figure for this aspect of the film and trying to dismantle Katniss.
I'm sorry, could you repeat part of that question?
Yeah, no. What are your thoughts on Plutarch?
So this is one of those parts in the story where I had to divorce my mind from my knowledge of the books and prior viewing, just to like try to watch the scene through new eyes. Because if you do not have prior knowledge of the story before coming into this movie, you would not know who Plutarch is. He is the propagandist machine. He is working for Panem. He is like the head game maker. And he plays his role very well, where it's like, he is like, how do we destroy her image? He gives some logical examples that actually do make sense. Like, this is a way of like destroying someone's image, making them look bad. But at the same time, we're also given these like little glimpses, little scenes that are like, they're little clues, but you don't realize that in the moment. Like when he says the audio, there was a 5-second delay and the video cut out after they saw her stand up in front of the peacekeeper. So he wasn't sure how much of that went to the other districts. That was a little telltale sign that something got out to help foment, to add to the rebellion, though it was almost like an accident, though it was actually intentional. Especially when it's revealed that Plutarch actually isn't for Panem, and he is a plant, more or less, for the rebellion already in District 13. So, and he has been planning this for a while. So, but he plays his role very well, where it's like, he legitimately is playing the head game maker. He is killing people in the games. He is like creating legitimate propaganda for Panem. So it's like, for all intents and purposes, he looks like the antagonist, like he looks like Snow's right-hand man until but there's also like these little like tidbits here and there that like slightly contradict it, though you wouldn't like directly contradict it. It's not until, but it also like, it's like foreshadowing, where it's like at the very end when it's suddenly revealed like Plutarch actually isn't for Panem and he's been working to get Katniss out of Panem for a bit now. So it's believable, and it's actually, I liked it. I personally like how Plutarch's character works throughout this movie. I like what he does, because it's a very well-developed role. So
yeah, I would say of all the characters, even though you don't necessarily get a lot of the motivation for why Plutarch's doing what he's doing, it's appropriate for this film, right? Because you want the perspective, at least until the very end, where you get that big reveal that he's actually on Katniss's side, that he is the enemy, that he is the person who's trying to destroy her. And so, yeah, other than that one critique, which I mentioned earlier, where you see that it seems like he's protecting her, that's also, in my mind, a clue that he is actually a rogue agent. Other than that, you get this impression that he is on the villain's side. And so, for sure, I think that he's one of the better characters, and the way that they lead him into that final revelation by the end of the film is done pretty organically and done fairly well. So I think of all the aspects of this film, he is a compelling revelation, right? And we talked about revelations many times. We're big fans of good reveals that change the game, right? And this one in many ways does change the game because it makes you look back and say both, one, everything that happened before is put in a new light, and two, it has definite consequences for what's going to happen in the next story, which is very critical to a good revelation, is having consequences and something changes now that you know this knowledge, right? So he's really good in regards to that aspect. He doesn't need to be super nuanced in this film because of that in regards to motivation, right? Which is key to developing that emotional investment, right? But yeah, he's pretty good. I think that if you detach him from, I'm not convinced the plot armor thing isn't there. I think that there's understandable reasons because of Plutarch why they're there. But I think it's one of my gripes with the film, and I don't know that it necessarily is resolved by how Snow is revealed in contrast to Plutarch in this one. And yes, they do give it a little more nuance to Snow in regards to Seneca Crane, but Seneca Crane is a lot more of the yes man to Snow in the last one compared to Plutarch in this one, where Seneca Crane takes the command of Snow and then develops it into the propaganda machine, rather than Plutarch, who pushes back as part of the propaganda machine to try to develop this in a new light. So, with all that being said, we should probably get into the games themselves because that is a critical part of the story in this one. Once they get to that limelight and they have all been selected for the games, Peeta offers himself as tribute for Haymitch. That's the name. Yeah, there we go. Haymitch. And then they go off to the games to then compete once again in the middle of the arena with all of these other people who are also outraged at that. Would love to get your thoughts on a couple characters here, and you can take these however you want, but I would love your thoughts on Finnick specifically, and also Cinna, because Cinna takes a much bigger role in this film, I would say, compared to the previous one. So what are your thoughts on those?
Well, I'll start with Cinna. I mean, the reality is Cinna, I forget if this is revealed in the third book or movie or not, but he has a more direct role with the rebellion in 13th than you realize. And so he is, while he's not directly encouraging the rebellion in Katniss, he is like adding little touches and things to like add to that imagery on her. And he is like, and it's enough that when she's finally put into the games, you see him getting beat up by the peacekeeper guards right in front of her, and she can't do anything about it because she's in the tube about to get put up into the games. Right. It's like, and in later scenes, like, I think it's implied that he actually dies shortly after that, Cinna. So that is the last time you actually ever see his character. So, you know, he's clearly on Katniss's side. He's clearly trying to help her, but he's also like adding like little touches to her to like add to the rebellion more or less. But like, even though he's like part of this rebellion, he is legitimately doing what he can to help her survive. So it's not like he's like, oh, full blown, like, even when later you learn he is part of the rebellion, he is still like, his primary goal is to keep her safe and to like help her to win the games. I mean, those are my basic thoughts on Cinna. There's not much more I can really add unless you want to go in detail about something specific. Because otherwise I'll just go on to Finnick.
No, he's more of a minor character, and I only wanted to note that it's interesting how they took someone who is more of a sideline character and develop him a lot more in this one in a way that I think was pretty effective, where you see that he has genuine care for her, that he is not just some person who gussies her up and makes her look like this fantastic individual that everyone should care for, but he has some level of motive behind that. And you get some level of resignation by him when she has the revelation in front of everyone else, where she is in the wedding dress and then she twirls around and her dress turns into the symbol of the Mockingjay. And you know that he did that on purpose, right? He wanted to show her as some level of fomenting rebellion type individual. And he, in that, realizes that he might have just signed his own death warrant, right? And he thought that the revelation of this symbol, that keeping her in the limelight as someone who is not a fan of the Capitol, is critical to keeping this unrest going, which is what the goal was for him as a member of the rebellion. So yeah, 100% you get, and I'm not sure, we'll have to see again when we watch it if he gets developed more in that, but for sure he is involved there. With that being said, he's not like a huge character in the film, so it's not like he needs a lot of extra screen time beyond what you get there.
Yes.
Finnick is a much more prevalent part of this film, and he has a lot more nuance to him compared to some of the other characters as a new character in this film. What are your thoughts on him?
Well, I mean, just to go over, I mean, these are all former tributes victors who've won the games. Like every single one of them has won at one point or another. And while in this movie, they don't go into a whole lot of detail on like some of them, except for how maybe they won a prior game. You later learn at the end of the game that at least half the tributes were in on this plan with Plutarch to save her, which is really interesting when you consider that. That means that because some of them die off screen in the games, so you realize these people went into the games trying to help in the situation, but they knew they were going to probably die in the arena, some of them. And so it's like, and Plutarch actually killed them, even if it was indirectly, because they participated in the games. So it's like, and Finnick is one of those people who's definitely in on it. But of course, Katniss doesn't know, Peeta doesn't know. The only clue we have that he's in on it is the gold bracelet, more or less. And even then, like, we don't even know fully there is a plan that Hamish and Finnick are part of. You just know that somehow Finnick has Hamish's golden bracelet, which is one of the only things in the games that is probably the best thing for Finnick to have to convince Katniss in that moment that Finnick is probably on their side and not against them. Because, like, why would Hamish give Finnick the golden bracelet? So, his character is unique in that, like, even though he's won, he's cocky, he has, like, these arrogant attributes, you get the impression, like, he has had his own loss. He's had his own, like, pain and struggles he's gone through, especially when, like, Annie is brought up. You realize something has happened to him that he has had to struggle through and had to endure. So he is not, even though he is this, like, cocky character, you start to sympathize with him towards the end because you realize, oh, he's not like, he's had his own, just like Katniss, he's had his own struggles too. And so I mean, Finnick is very well developed. He's of all the, and it's really funny because of, like, without the prior knowledge of them being in on this thing, without, like, knowing any of that, you assume it's the same thing as last time. It's the same Hunger Games situation, and the other tributes are like forming a team with her in a way that she doesn't fully understand. But because this happened last time in the Hunger Games with the other side, she just sees it as like roles reversed. Well, now she's on the side where there's a team going and they're hunting down the other tributes. And so she's like, as soon as those other tributes are gone, they're going to go after me and Peeta next.
Right.
So her plan, like, and it's understandable, is like, they're only being friendly to me because of the situation. It benefits them to be friendly with me for now. As soon as those other tributes are gone, they're going to turn on me like wolves and try to kill me and Peeta. So it creates legitimate tension from a storytelling and audience perspective, because, like, you don't know what's happened. You think, and so it's like when they're planning to escape, and then they have that plan at the tree, and then they split Peeta and her up, and just like, oh, that's not good. They were just planning to escape. Like, it plays things very well from a tension standpoint, because you don't know what's going on as an audience, or even as Katniss, because Katniss doesn't know. And she was intentionally left out of the plan because she was being watched so heavily by Snow. So, like, we can't let her know. She has to be, like...
Well, there's a acknowledgement by everyone in the film that Katniss is a bad actor in regards to showing her motivations, right?
Yes.
She can't help but reveal, and you see this earlier on with District 11, where she can't help but give this homage to Rue when she's there. And so when you have that, you have characters like Haymitch who go, she can't know the plan, because if she knows the plan, she's going to reveal it to Snow in one of these recordings. So she needs to be kept in the dark. And that's where you have these other characters trying to use her as the symbol and keep her alive because of how important she is to the continued rebellion of the districts, while also not letting her in on it. And they hope that she can continue to organically develop that as the film progresses. But because we don't know that, you see her trying to play the political game, if you will, with these other tributes, where she's trying to work with them but also not get killed by them because she thinks they're all against her. And that's where you get these nuances. And that being said, you get the indication that something's up because of how some of these members are acting, right? They don't kill her when they have the opportunity. In fact, some of them actually sacrifice their life so that she can live. And she goes, that's kind of weird. Why is this going on? And she doesn't really have the time or the wherewithal in the moment to figure that out. But she acknowledges, in a way that we can also acknowledge, this idea that something's not quite right. And that helps to indicate what's going on when it gets revealed later on, where this was all part of a grand plan from the rebellion.
Yes.
So yeah, and in regards to specifically Finnick's character, yeah, he's very good. He's not a Rue type character. He's a much stronger character in regards to being able to fight in the arena, that he can be an actual deadly force, but he has these other aspects to him that keep him grounded in being a more or less a good person, quote unquote, right? Where he has Mags, who's this person who trained him, and he wants to keep her alive, and then she sacrifices herself so that they can continue in the mission. Things like that help to develop him as a character, as someone who genuinely has hurt. You talked about Annie and other examples that keep him grounded in a different way. And you also see that critically in moments such as when, near the end of the film, she's trying to get out and she has her arrow knocked ready to shoot him, and she thinks that Finnick is going to kill her, and he sees her through the bushes and goes, remember who the real enemy is, right? And that's critical because you see that he knows something else, and he's trying to tell her, hey, like, let's don't kill me now, I'm on your side, without actually saying I'm on your side, right? So that becomes a critical linchpin to getting to that climactic scene at the end where she gets that big revelation from Plutarch and everyone else. But yeah, what are your thoughts on, as we just discussed, all of that leading to that climactic scene where they have the striking of the lightning on the tree, and then she ends up taking the wiring, and instead of letting it electrocute the water, she takes it, ties it to the arrow, and then shoots the dome to destroy the power surge, and more or less shuts down the games in that moment. What are your thoughts on that climactic scene, the revelation that we've been talking about this entire time? What are your thoughts?
I think that scene is perhaps a bit better developed in the book, though it is like hinted at in the movie, because you have the scene when they're training between BT and Katniss, where they're discussing the shield, and he points out that there's always a weakness to the shielding. And like, he, in that final scene, like, it's like if you look carefully, you can see it. And so when she's looking up, the idea is that she can see the edge of it. She can see like a weak point. And so when she sends the bolt electricity through it, she more or less disables the whole facility, destroying the game arena. So it is set up. It's just perhaps not. That's the only, like, I'm not sure if it's like for the audience perspective, it's easy to put those clues together and realize, oh, like, because it might almost seem random. Oh, she shoots an arrow into the sky, the dome, kind of situation.
Yeah, well,
but I mean, it is set up, but it maybe have been a little too vague in the movie. Is my only thought.
Yeah, I mean, I actually thought it wasn't too bad. Of all the parts of the film, I appreciated it partially because it felt like something that Plutarch talks about in the film, of moves and counter moves, right? Where she is put in a situation, they have a plan, the plan goes awry, and her response to that is to modify the plan in the moment to try to find a different solution. And the solution ends up working, right? She shoots the dome comes down, everything gets shut down more or less because of what she did. And so it's effective at making sure that the film progresses in a new way. And that's kind of a really good technique, I think, in regards to storytelling, is especially when the heroes have a plan, how do you make sure that the plan doesn't just go according to plan, right? Because once that happens, then you have some level of it feels like plot armor, for one, but two, you you don't want it to be static and go according to plan, because that's where you need to show the resilience of the protagonist in the midst of chaos, the ability to be adaptable and to modify the plan according to what's going on. It helps add to that tension, helps add to the dynamics of the film, and make sure that everything is progressing in new and unique ways where they're having to struggle, right? And so that was probably the pinnacle example of that in my mind for this film specifically.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you get that revelation, you realize that this is the start of a new war, and at the very end of the film, you get this idea, two different ideas. One, even though Katniss escaped and the scientist guy escaped, I can't remember his name.
Oh, BT, Finnick, and Katniss, they all managed to escape. They got
those three escaped, but they do not.
Haymitch and Plutarch.
Yes, by Haymitch and Plutarch, but you do not get out Peeta. Peeta got captured. And two, you get the revelation from Gale once they get to District 13 that they just bombed the crap out of District 12, and District 12 doesn't really exist anymore.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on the conclusion of this film?
I have a few different thoughts, and I'll start with the first one because it involves believability of like the world itself, story, and for the most part, the Hunger Games like world building makes sense to me. It's not like there's nothing like groundbreakingly like broken per se about any of the whole system. In a certain way, it makes sense logically, and there's like things about it that like are believable. The only thing about it that I find slightly unbelievable is the destroying of the districts, because there was 13 districts at one point in time. They destroyed the 13th district for rebellion at some point in time, and now they just destroyed the 12th district for this whole situation with Katniss and this rebellion. And my only slight issue with that is that I'm not sure how many people know about Warhammer 40k, but in Warhammer 40k, there are millions of worlds, millions of systems, and so when they destroy a planet for rebellion or for infestation or whatnot, it's like, okay, it's just one planet out of millions. It's like, okay, it's like there's barely any loss in some ways. In this case, you only have 12 districts, which that's not a lot. And while each district even has its own unique like resource, they export to the capital, to Panem. So there's a part of me that does have a slight gripe with the fact you just destroyed a whole district, 1/12 of your total production of everything, which means one resource theoretically is no longer being made for you, which can you really exist without that? There's a part of me that just like takes a little bit of a gripe at that, which is one of my only complaints about the Hunger Games series is like, this doesn't add up. This kind of
especially because the specific thing that you're getting manufactured by District 12 is they are a mining colony, more or less. And so if you're going to continue to create this war machine, you would think they kind of need that from District 12 to be effective at waging war on their own citizens. So, I mean, I guess maybe they have enough reserves and they plan to repopulate it later, maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, at the very least, you're going to really shoot yourself in the foot by doing that.
Yes. Though you don't know this in this movie, but later on, it's like you realize they didn't destroy the Victor's village in 12. It's just like, that's just another thing. It's just like, why? Okay, you destroyed the rest of the district. I don't get this, but okay, that's my.
I mean, I guess, but no one lives there anymore.
Yeah, I know. It's just, I had to bring that up. Sorry.
Yeah.
But regarding the ending, the destruction of District 12 is like, okay, that's one thought. The other thought, is probably more important for the story, is it does in a way create a beginning, middle, and end. It creates a turning point in the whole overarching story. Whereas, like, because at the end of the first Hunger Games, Katniss goes from, like, she does this one act of rebellion, which gets her noticed by everyone, and, like, it helps her to survive, but it also puts her in a new situation. In this movie, we see her struggling with, like, these roles that are being thrust upon her, where people want her to be the symbol of the rebellion, but she doesn't want to be. And while she's just trying to survive and trying to keep Peeta alive too. Like, that's her expressed goal this time around. She's like, I'm not going to try to survive the Games this time. I'm just going to keep Peeta alive. Though Peeta in the end gets captured. So at the very end of this movie, with District 12 destroyed, like, you almost see this complete arc with her. She's like, okay, now I am actually fully committed to this rebellion thing. Like, now I have no choice. I have no options. Like, now I am directly fighting the Panem and I'm against the games and everything. Like you see, like this is now a turning point. This is like a change in the story, if you will, going forward. And in terms of like middle stories or even beginning stories, I actually really like it. Even though I think middle entries, they succeed more when there's an actual clear change in the course of the story. Like there is something of significance that has happened and changed either in a character or in several characters or in the situation, or it's like as a result of these events in this middle chapter, if you will. For some reason, my mind is going back to the Hobbit trilogy movies, like specifically like the Unexpected Journey, because I actually really liked the Unexpected Journey of those movies because there is a clear, definitive change over the course of that movie, where Bilbo goes from like he is not interested in going on this adventure, he's like wants to stay home, but he also changes by the end. He becomes a different person at the end, where it's like he is willing to stand up and like he overcomes his fear and has courage at the end of the first movie. You see this clearly shown in his actions. And you see this change going forward for his character in the story. And so like it creates, even though the story's not over at the end of the Unexpected Journey, you see there is a change that took place in the movie that is significant in the course of the story. And so like I like it when a movie and a story does that. Like this isn't just like filler material, if you will. There is something happened here, and that we should be taking note of. Like we're not just going from point A to point B. There is like we saw some things happen. So, and I think Catching Fire does that very well, and that's why I gave it probably as high of a score as I did. Is because I liked how they handled all that. All those themes and ideas.
Yeah, and I see where you're coming from, especially in regards to the Hobbit movies. And I know we discussed and reviewed those previously on the podcast. So if you want to get full thoughts on that, just look at that review. But in regards to a comparison of the two, The Hobbit definitely has a development of Bilbo's character, who's, this guy who doesn't really want to go on this adventure, but is in some ways finagled into it by Gandalf and the dwarves. And there's a lot of this discussion between the conflict of the dwarves and Bilbo. And at the end, you have some level of arc between them where Bilbo comes to almost desire to be on this mission when he wasn't previously, and he has some emotional buy-in there. The dwarves, to some degree, end up accepting him more as a person who's part of the crew rather than just being this guy that they think, I guess, Gandalf wanted him along, and so he has some value, but we don't see it right now, right? There is some change to that emotional development there. So yeah, there's definitely some level of arc in regards to the emotional aspect of it in that film. In regards to this one, I'm not as convinced that that's a solid point here, and maybe this is just my take on it, but specifically for Katniss, you get the impression that she's just there to survive, and at the end of the film, she plus Peeta, right, gets there to survive plus Peeta, and the main development that you get that's changed from the beginning to the end is this idea that Katniss wants Peeta to survive, and she's kind of conflicted about it because she doesn't really want him. She just understands that he's a good person that doesn't deserve the consequences of this world, right? And he's more or less the damsel in distress, right? Peeta needs someone to save him, and Katniss is the one to do it. And by the end of the film, she fails in that, but she also realizes that she has some care for him beyond that. And that's not fully developed in this film, right? You get that more in the next film. So the consequences of that are not fully displayed here. But secondarily, I think in regards to Katniss's character, the idea that she's fully engaged in this conflict and bought into the rebellion, I don't know is fully developed in this one, which is why I think that this film maybe isn't as highlighted in regards to the Hunger Games films, because it's not full. Doesn't come to the full conclusions on some of these themes and ideas. That she understands that she's a symbol. She understands there's potentially a war going to happen, but she doesn't really want to be involved. And at the very end, you just see there's consequences to those actions, but you don't know where she's at emotionally, if that makes sense. And so I don't know that the themes around where she's at, where she's coming from, and where she's going have come to that terminating conclusion until the next film. which isn't necessarily the end all be all of the film, right? But all that to say is like in regards to the cohesiveness of a plot and understanding where we're going with this, it cannot be self-contained because of that. Does that make sense?
I mean, I would say that this movie is over. Obviously, the story's over, and her arc is over either. I would just say that there was a significant change to her character as a result of the events of this movie, of this story, that stay with her going forward into the next movie and going to the next part of the story. We don't, like, this movie wasn't just filler material. Like, in a way,
No.
like, this story was essential. This part was essential because we saw her actions at the end of the first game. She wasn't like fully rebelling. In fact, if anything, we are seeing like if she could even go back to the way her life was before the first Hunger Games. We're seeing if like we're seeing her like struggle and like trying to get back to that and trying to find some level of peace. But she can't. And more or less, because of her actions or failure to do certain actions, she is thrust into this position that she can't ignore. And in the end, she's like, she realizes, like, she just gives in. She's like, I'm going to fight against Panem now because now, like, that's the only option available to me. Because I tried to, like, go back to the way things were before, I can't. So
yeah. I mean, she definitely can't go back.
So that was my major point with what I said. Like, sorry, it definitely isn't the end of her character arc. It definitely isn't the end of the story. In fact, like, all these actions will even continue to have more consequences going forward into the third movie, into the third story. We know that. And I'm excited to see what's going. Like, forward to the next part. But it's just, I just, what I appreciate is just and I think the only reason I bring that up is because I don't like filler material. I just don't like it. Like, it's whether it's a show, a movie, or it's our series. I get annoyed when a movie just feels like this is just filler material to the next one. And they go, just like, we're not actually caring about this installment in the story. We're looking forward to the next big thing that's coming. And Marvel is a huge, I hate to say it, but Marvel has done this quite a bit, where it's almost like they didn't care about the movie that was right in front of them. They just looked forward to the next event movie, whatever it was. And it was just like, it kind of devalued the movie we were watching in that moment, devaluing the story that was right in front of us. And I just don't like it. I hate it when a movie or story does that. I want there to be reasons to be watching what we're watching in front of us. And so Catching Fire does that. They give us reason to be watching what we're watching. It isn't just filler material, because it's part of the ongoing story of Katniss Everdeen and what happens in the Hunger Games. So, and that's why, as I said, that's why it has over 7 points on my score, because I really like it.
Yeah.
So,
and this hypothetical might not be something you would agree could be changed, but just out of curiosity, do you think that there is a way that this film could have terminated where the film would feel complete on its own and you wouldn't need another one necessarily?
You kill Katniss? Sorry, that's the first
I mean, I guess that's true. You could do that.
I mean, in a way, to be frank, this movie is kind of a cliffhanger ending, where it's like, it's not like, oh, like, what's good, like, it's a complete cliffhanger ending, but now Peeta is captured by Panem as well as Joanna, one of the other attributes. You, like, both of them are captured, and and you don't know what's going to happen to them. So, in a way, it's like, this is directly leading into the third movie. Now that doesn't mean you can't have a fully complete story inside of this. And as I said, this is like an ongoing story. Like, this is like one of those series where a story starts in Hunger Games, the first one, and ends in, was it Mockingjay, I think, the third one?
Yeah. Yep.
And it's just like and when I look at that, so because we know, like, even from the get-go, like, there are definitely, like, it's like The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings, where it's like, there's an ongoing story across all the movies, all 3 installments. So we don't expect it to end in movie 1 or movie 2. We expect it to end in movie 3. So in that regard, I don't have the expectations, like, in this one with Catching Fire, because we know it's the second installment. It's not over yet. We have another movie still coming. So I don't have an issue with it. Honestly, I don't have an issue with it being not a complete story. We have significant story change, but I don't think it's necessary to have a complete story in this. Now, obviously, I take issue with series that aren't clearly labeled as a okay. To go back to Avengers, and I know I'm the outlier in this on the podcast, but I do not like Infinity War because, I mean, like, not that I hate it, it's a decent movie and it has some fun moments, clearly, and Thanos is a good villain, but it isn't clearly, like, because of the way the story is told, it is a complete story in and of itself. It doesn't actually end, like, in a way where it's like, oh, there's another movie coming. You actually, the way they tell the story, it's almost like a complete ending where Thanos wins and they are beaten, and there is no like follow up where it's like, oh, there's another story coming. The way it plays out, it's like this is the end of the story almost, and I really hate that. Not only because of and the reason I hate it is because of the themes of Infinity War. When you actually look at the themes of storytelling of what's going on, and we already went over that in Infinity War, and I did discuss my thoughts on it there, so I'm not going to go back into it here because this is just going to add way too much more time to this podcast when it's a Hunger Games podcast. So, my thoughts are, if it's a middle entry and it's clearly a middle entry of an ongoing story, make that clear, and that's fine. Like the way Catching Fire does it, it's clearly the middle part of an ongoing story. It's not the end. So, and I'm fine with that. So I was satisfied with it.
Yeah, and obviously there is some disagreement on how should the film have a cohesive ending in a middle piece, such as the Infinity War. And yes, once again, if you want to hear our full thoughts on that, just go listen to that one. Right? Don't get stuck on that here. But in regards to, I guess, what I'm looking for in this film is I wish we had gotten a little more finality from Katniss emotionally in regards to what she's thinking now that she realizes that what she was fighting for couldn't be. You get implications in regards to what other people are saying, specifically characters like Haymitch, characters like Finnick, and especially Gale at the very end, where you realize that there is no point of return. And the only response you get from that, more or less, is this idea that Katniss is despairing. But especially because I don't know the themes that you get in this one are different compared to the themes that you get in the first one. You get a lot of the same idea of fomented unrest, some idea of rebelling against a tyrannical system, and some idea of sacrificing for the people you care about. These are some of the same themes you saw in the last one. And I don't know that you get a lot of new content for the ideas expressed there, other than just saying it's part of a wider world, right? It's more than just the Hunger Games. It is all of Panem that's involved in this. And so that's how they broaden the scope of the themes, but I don't know that the ideas are really delved into in a deeper way in this film. And so maybe getting a little more of an emotional response from Katniss by the end would have been helpful for getting some finality and a better ending arc, in my opinion, to the end of this film compared to what we get in some other films, such as The Hobbit, where you get Bilbo and Thorin having that reconciliatory conversation at the end at the Eagle's place. You get at least some idea that there is some conclusion to that arc there emotionally, and you have that reconciliation that they were not having previously in the film. I don't know that you get that from Katniss in here, where you get some emotional finality to where she is what she is feeling at the end.
I would say that's subjective because I saw the final shot on her, the way she looks at the camera, more or less, the way at the end, like the way she, like her face changes, the expression changes. I would say those are like visual, like key clues as to what she's thinking and to what's going on emotionally, even though she's not like talking in the moment. So the way I saw it in that scene, that she is like she is having a like she's resigning to her role, more or less. She is like, okay, I am now, this is where I'm going, this is where I'm heading now. Like, that is the way I interpreted her final moments, like in the movie, like final moments of screen time. I do want to push back a little bit about the themes, like the same ideas, because I would think in my opinion, there are other themes that are slightly like either reversed or looked at in considering of the Hunger Games. Because in the first movie, we like it's clearly it's a game of survival where it's like trust doesn't come easily, and she is forced to fend for herself. Everyone's against each other and trying to betray each other. Um, in this particular version, though, she doesn't realize it, but half the game is actually on her side, and she doesn't want to trust anyone. But she's also kind of forced into trusting people because Haymitch pushes her into that role, and other people are pushing her into that role. But even then, it's like she doesn't want to trust. She wants to like look out for herself and think like, and for PETA. But at the same time, she has to like look past all that, realize because the first game it's all about she's not even like directly thinking like fighting against Panem, like rebelling against like seeing them as the enemy in the first game. She's just trying to survive until she's like, I'm not going to kill PETA more or less, because I'm done with this game. But in the second movie, in this game, there's definitely more of an aspect where it's like like there's more of an acknowledgement from her as well as the other people. Where it's like this is a game like rigged by others more powerful than us. We are fighting directly against people who are in control of the situation, who are making us fight for their entertainment, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like there's definitely more of a conversation had in the games where it's like this isn't like just survival. This is like we're being played by powerful people for entertainment purposes in the guise of remembering an event 75 years ago. So I think there are just like these conversations that are a little different from the first movie, where it's like this isn't just like there's more of an aspect where it's like acknowledging those in control of the games themselves. So, and also the whole idea of trust in the middle of that situation gets explored in a little different of a way, I would say.
Yeah, and I think I'd be even willing to concede that trust is more of a theme in this one compared to the previous one. I still wonder if there's even an arc there specifically because even that ending scene where she's interacting with those characters such as Haymitch at the end, her reaction to that, even though you realize that she was being helped by other people and she should have trusted them and didn't, her reaction is not one of saying, oh my goodness, I actually do have allies here. She looks at Haymitch and says, you lied. You said you were going to protect PETA and you didn't. And her reaction is once again one of mistrust rather than one of saying, I agree with you and see that I'm on your side. So
I just said those are themes that showed up. I did say that she changed and accepts them for one thing. And second off, her reaction in that scene is completely justified considering that
it is.
She and Haymitch had conversations about protecting PETA, about keeping him alive. And suddenly he's captured and she's safe from Panem. That is the exact opposite of what they had discussed. So she's legitimately upset because of everything that happened. Because of that,
no, I'm not saying it's not justified. I think all of this is to say, like, the themes, the emotional responses of characters, and all of this, in my mind, and this leads into, does this film have a lasting impact, right? But the idea is that this film, because all of these things are not, they're all cliffhanger, right? Everything in this in regards to the emotional response, the thematic response, the storyline response, all of that comes to more or less get cut off at the end and say, there is going to be another story, means that this film cannot be detached from the next film. And so that's why I think in regards of, if you think about scenes in the stories, you either probably think about the first film where you have, for example, the Barry scene at the very end where she ends up winning with PETA, or the end film, which we're going to get to in regards to the scene with Coriolanus Snow, right, at the very end. And we'll get to that. But like those are the themes or ideas that I think most easily stick in people's minds in regards to thinking about this entire story. And the reason that I think the second film in some ways is not in that picture is because the second film, there's no way to separate the second film and think of it distinctly. It has to be thought of in the context of the other ones. And this is where I'm trying to figure out is there a way to show a middle film in a way that it is genuinely good in its own right, in a storytelling perspective, or is it inherently required to be one that leads on to the next film and is not distinct, if that makes sense?
Well, I would say no and yes in some ways, only because I think you can have a middle movie that is distinctive and has things that stand apart. And I would say that I think I don't, and maybe you and I have different experiences with this series, but I actually do remember this movie, like bits of this movie from even years later. So it wasn't like, oh, I completely forgot about this movie. No, I remembered things about this movie, like even like the political intrigue, the games itself, the like things that happened, like just like what the struggles characters go through. Like, so I mean, I don't think this movie isn't like is forgettable. Like compared to the other two, is even like lost. I mean, but I would also say that when it comes to a series of movies, I think if you actually have a well told series with a like so over the course of like 3 or 4 movies or whatever, I think almost inherently because if the story is good, the middle movies are going to be less memorable than the beginning and end. Either that or you're going to have a really bad ending of a story and people are just going to remember the middle one because it was better for some reason than the end or beginning or something. Like that's what I think is inherently going to happen. I mean, because even if you think of movies like the two Towers and Lord of the Rings, like when I talk to people, most people when they say, "What's your favorite movie? What scenes do you remember?" It's usually Fellowship of the Ring or Return of the King. Two Towers is usually the one that gets given the shorthand in that scenario. And when people do mention, not that people forget it though, because people do think of it, but usually it's just in terms of Helm's Deep. So,
Yep.
But even then, that doesn't mean the movie is bad. The Two Towers is still a great movie, but it's like. I think inherently, because of how good Lord of the Rings is, people think of the great beginning or the great ending. Because, like, I think we all like a good ending to a good story or a great, like, start. It's just, but I think because we are drawn naturally, and maybe there's a conversation for movies worth watching or something, but it's just like, I think naturally as human beings, we are drawn to a great beginning or a great ending.
Yep.
So it's like, regardless of where you fall on either one, you still neglect the middle. In a way where it's like the middle doesn't matter as much as the beginning or end. And so
for sure. Yeah. Go ahead, keep going.
And it's like not that you completely forget the middle or that nothing good happens in the middle. Clearly you're gonna have your favorite moments of things that happen in the middle of a story. I do. In every movie and series I watch. So it's not to discount the middle. It's just to say I think in terms of evaluating a story, in terms of beginning, middle, and end, I think we all naturally tend to like the beginning or the end more so than the middle. So it's either Act 1 or Act 3. So
yeah, it's easier. It's easier to, I think, have some critical moments in those ones. I don't know that necessarily means the middle films need to be shorthanded in regards to the value they bring for sure. And I don't think you're disagreeing with that, but especially if you think of films, for example, The Empire Strikes Back. That one is iconic in the Star Wars series because of the revelations they have, the scenes that they have, and the arc that you have within that fifth film. And so the idea that can't exist isn't necessarily, and I don't think either of us are saying that it can't exist. I think that there are examples that it does go well. And more or less, this is more just me posing the question is, could this film have been done in a way, especially ending it, where it felt a little more complete on its own and had a little more distinctiveness compared to the one that it leads into? But maybe that's a discussion that can be had regarding the next film. So I don't know that, because we'll get to the opener of that one and see how that one bleeds into the future of that whole franchise of the Hunger Games. So unless you disagree with that, I think that might be a good spot to end it on. So stay tuned. So that is The Hunger Games Catching Fire. We hope you all enjoyed. We'll be back as we always are next week, and we'll see you all then.